with Gina.
The news with Gina Grad.
Well, the next time parking enforcement officers chalk the little mark on your tire, they may actually be acting unconstitutionally.
I saw this.
Yeah. Now, before you get excited, it doesn't affect us yet. But a federal appeals court ruled Monday that chalking tires is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So the case was brought by this girl, Allison Taylor. She's a Michigan woman who the court describes as a frequent recipient of parking tickets. And it's always the same officer. Where is it? Tabitha Hoskins wrote her all 15 tickets. A 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit unanimously agreed that chalking tires is a kind of trespassing, and it requires a warrant.
Can I say this? Parking enforcement, like if the government's constantly trying to drill down on the pay gap and inequities and the haves and the have-nots, and they're constantly trying to level the playing field, and for that, they're not going after the poor Mexicans who are working the leaf blowers, even though it's polluting everyone's lungs, including theirs, and waking everyone up and everything like that. I get it. But they simultaneously would like to raise the price of gasoline, fuel, if you're flying F-18. They like to raise the price of gas, and they've tripled down on their parking enforcement shit. Parking enforcement fucks up poor people badly. And the reason it fucks up poor people badly is A, they don't got $61 or $86 or $110 to pay it. But B, I haven't got a goddamn parking ticket since I've been rich because I have a driveway. I have a spot.
What I wouldn't give for a parking ticket.
I have a spot with my name on it. I park in my garage when I go home. I don't park in front of my house. I don't have to worry about the street sweeper. I don't drive a van and go back to A&B Carpet and Van Nuys in the middle of the night and park on the wrong side of the street. I don't work doing earthquake rehab in downtown and park my truck and then have the street sweeper come by between noon and 2. I don't deal with parking tickets anymore. I also do not deal with getting shit towed or getting stuff fined or tickets or whatever, because when I go to Century City to take a meeting now, I used to go to Century City to paint commercial buildings, to paint lawyer suites inside Mustang and Navajo white. I'd ride a motorcycle. The parking for the day was like $19 back then. I was going to make $63 for the day. I couldn't cut out a third of my take home to park, so I'd park by the side of the building or off on the other. You are forced by the cost of the goddamn parking, wherever you go, downtown, Century City, whatever, to kind of look for alternative places to park. You don't pull up in front of the comedy club and valet. You're poor.
Go to the neighborhood.
You got to go into the neighborhood. The neighborhood has 61 signs on one post. They just keep adding fucking addendums to this thing. You are not reading at a 6th grade level. You are staring up. Maybe English isn't your first language, and you're just looking up at this never-ending sea of signs into the night. And you're like, we have a what permit and a no between 6 a.m. and 6 or sunset, and street lights come on, or somewhere between Hanukkah and Passover. There's no blah 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 blah. Then your tires weren't turned in toward. You take fucking poor people and you gouge the shit out of them, and then you give them a choice. You can either pay money to the city that you don't really have, and some of these parking tickets are a day's work for a lot of working poor folks, or you can do what I did, which is never pay the shit and try to get on with your life, but at some point they'll get you, and then you'll owe a lot and you don't have it. And I was actually taken to jail. Not prison, but I was taken to the North Hollywood holding tank. Like, I got arrested. I got pulled off my motorcycle. I got put in the car, and I was taken to prison. By the way, rich man, poor man, somebody puts a seatbelt on for you.
Oh, that's right.
Opens your door for you.
The peak or the nadir.
It's not a middle class problem right there.
And guess what else ain't free? The tow yard.
Oh,
every day that car sits there.
Oh, and those poor
$100
people. And again, I don't get parking. Now, I don't get parking tickets because I'm sort of wired, like, okay, check the sign. But I have money for the valet. I have money for the parking lot. I have money for the meter. I have a driveway. I have a garage. I have a parking space at work. You don't get them. If you took, I guarantee, Bill Gates and, pick me the Jeff Bezos. I guarantee you Jeff Bezos gets less parking tickets a year than a guy who's waiting in line at the Home Depot to jump in the back of someone's truck to work as a day laborer. Like, I guarantee Bezos, I'll bet you Bezos hasn't got a parking ticket in 9 years. I'll bet you between having people do your bidding, like you go pick up my shit and bring it to my house or whatever the groceries, right? You just don't get them.
Having your car parked and valeted, yeah.
Right.
The pillars of poor people parking in LA, we've all experienced this. Number one, getting up early to move your car because it's part of street cleaning, it's some sort of restriction, something. Or after the hour, got to move my car. After that, and tandem parking. Got to get up early to let the roommate out. Got to let up early to let the girlfriend out, or whatever it is. The tandem parking. Every one of us, I'm sure, has experienced that.
I've had tandem parking at work.
Yeah,
it's awful.
I had
stacked.
I moved an apartment on Franklin, old apartment on Franklin on the hill part between Highland and whatever, and no parking. It was like a building from the 20s. There's no parking, and you could only park on the street in Franklin. And of course, the meter maid would come between 6 and 8. Now, if the meter maid came between 8 and 10, I'd be gone. Because I had to do construction. I'd be in my car. But because they come, and then you'd come home that night, and there was only parking on the side where the meter maid, and they'd write you tickets whether 3/4 of the time the street sweeper never came between. Sometimes it would never come. They'd still write you a ticket. It doesn't matter. One of the biggest, longest arguments I got into was when I was doing earthquake rehab and down on Normandy and Western and all that junk. And it was the same deal. A bunch of old apartment buildings. None of the old apartment buildings had like subterranean parking. If you build an apartment building today or commercial office space or anything, they just have, for every 1,000 square foot of commercial office space, you need 3 parking spaces. For every unit, you need 2 parking spaces, whatever it is. Back then, it was 50 units, 0 parking spaces. So everyone's just out on the street, and they do this thing where it's like between noon and 2 every Wednesday, and everybody who's working on this job would have to drop whatever they're doing. They'd have to go out to the street, have to move your car around. At one point, it was like, it was between noon and 2, and it was like 151 or 148, but fresh, wet tracks were on the street where the street sweeper had gone, and I pulled right in behind it and parked on the fresh, wet tracks. And the fucking meter maid came out, and he was just like, "You're getting a ticket." And I'm like, "We're working here, man." And he's like, "You're getting a ticket." And I'm like, "The street sweeper went by." And he's like,
"That's the whole point.
No parking between noon and 2. And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but it's for the street sweeper. You have this big window, and he went by, and he's not coming back. So can I just park here and go to work?" And he was like, "No, I'm giving you a ticket." And it's like the only time I ever did I want the name of your supervisor. I want to call this person and tell them just who's working for them, because this is now starting to bleed into harassment. Good. We cleared out. Street sweeper had a clear shot at the curb. Fine. Now they're gone, and we got to get back to doing rehab earthquake work for the city. And this is we're being harassed at this point. I think the guy kind of backed off, as I recall. But anyway, parking tickets really affect poor people. And even if rich people got parking tickets, $81 is nothing to rich people, and it's a fortune to poor. But the real sad truth is you don't get them when you make money.
That's a dark secret we didn't know.
I've literally had a panic attack trying to run to my car to get there before the street sweeper.
Right. Yeah. And it's the only thing the city does efficiently.
Well, this is a little bit validating and satisfying to hear, because this U.S. Court of Appeals, they said that marking tires was to raise revenue, not to protect the public against a safety risk. Obviously, we know that, but it's nice to have it in writing by a judge. The decision affects the Sixth Circuit, though. That is 4 states, but most of us aren't in them: Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee.
Also, I would also add this addendum, which is, any meter or any street parking where there's more than 4.5 people sleeping on the sidewalk by your car, null and void.
No, it's not a sidewalk anymore. It's a bed.
Yeah, you can't. You can't come up to me and start talking about my front was in a green loading zone, or the meter had expired 4 minutes earlier, or check the sign. You don't have a permit with whatever.
In this guy's bathroom.
There's a whole gypsy tribe. Their tribe, and they're sleeping in their own flop, and they're right next to my car. We can't step over them and get to my car.
And in terms of, so like I'm thinking about like Clear at the airport, right? You pay an exorbitant amount of money, but you're whisked right through the line. People pay extra for that convenience. For forward thinking, let's just say LA or any major city, wouldn't you pay, Adam, you certainly would, $1,000 a year just be able to park in any meter, not have to feed the meter, just pull up and park?
Well, sort of, but as I think about, again, with me and the meters, it's like I go to Burbank Airport, I drop it off at the valet. We go there. Like, I don't hit that many meters in my day. But I get what you're saying. Like
there should offer some version of that where it's like $500 a year, park in any meter for up to an hour.
Yeah,
or something.
Everything to do with cars.
Think outside the box, people.
Everything to do with cars is a ripoff. Well, and it's a ripoff because they got you. They know they got you. Like when you go to LAX and it's like, it's $33 a day to park. And you pull in at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, and then you pick your car up at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday, and they're like, 2 days parking. Right. And you're like, no. 26 hours parking. And like, that's 2 days. Yep. It's a full 2 days. And like, what are you supposed to do? Going, you know what? I'm going to walk to MarkGeragos' office, and you'll see us. Yeah. I'll be the guy who's walking with purpose when I come back. I'm going to be angry. Like,
I'll be tired of shit 'cause I'm not driving.
They got your shit. You pay for it. Yep. It's the same way. By the way, there is no other timing that really works that way. Like, again, because they got you by the fucking short hairs. Whenever I've had anything impounded, I've had stuff impounded at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then been there at like 6 in the morning or 8 in the morning, like the next day to get out of impound. Like 2 days.
2 full days.
2 full days. Like, well, they brought it in Tuesday night. Now it's Wednesday morning. Tuesday, Wednesday. It's like, okay, it's been 9 hours. Nope, it's been 2 days. Then that's how they do it. Because why? Because they can.
Yeah.
That's why. Because they have your car, and then there's a bunch of barbed wire in between you and your car. And some flunky who likes making people miserable. And by the way, people that do anything with cars, parking and all that kind of stuff, parking enforcement, impound, they're just assholes who have no soul and don't mind making people miserable. Like the greatest, I'll share it with you. People think, your twins being born, greatest day. No. Driving off a tow truck was the greatest day of my life. But
everyone has a kid at some point.
Almost no one drives off a tow truck. In a stick shift, by the way. That took some doing. Greatest day, second greatest day was this.
So tell us all about your wedding.
I was going to see a show at probably the Palace or something. Back, maybe the Boston's or something back in the day. It's Hollywood, Highland, whatever that, Cahuenga, whatever that street is. It's like on the hill there under the freeway. Yeah, it's Vine. Yeah. It's Vine.
I think the Palace became the Avalon, where the new fundraiser is going to be.
Oh, is that?
I think the Avalon used to be the Palace. The returning conquering king comes home.
A lot of memories about that place. A lot of memories.
You got your first 10 minutes right there.
Jesus, goddamn Christ. Boy, did I drive drunk that night. That's crazy, man. Yeah, I was at the Pretty in Pink premiere party there.
God, that's
awesome. A lot of peace.
Yeah. Also famously, against all odds, Jeff Bridges' football, whatever movie, James Woods was the club owner.
Wow.
He was like the promoter guy. You know the band that played there during that movie? Like they had that band in the background?
It wasn't Phil Collins?
Oh, you should see it. It's a good movie.
The song's great.
Yeah.
It's a really good movie. No one brings it up like, against all odds, that scene.
It's solid. Like it's solid. It's like Jeff Bridges is a professional football player, and he is in love with this beautiful woman, and I think
This is very Tool-toony.
I think James Woods is her like ex-boyfriend, club owner. He runs the Palace or the Avalon now. Okay. It's a big, beautiful Art Deco place.
Yeah.
Like it's super high ceiling and beautiful. And
Semisonic there.
Oh yeah, man! Closing time.
That's right.
And good song. And Kid Creole and the Coconuts were the band that was playing. You guys don't know that name?
Never heard of them.
Kid Creole and the Coconuts. I don't know. They were like kind of a thing in the 80s.
Like ska? What's the vibe?
Kind of a little more
classical,
a little more Caribbean ska or whatever. Okay. We'll try to find Kid Creole and the Coconuts. Yeah.
Yeah, it says that they have a variety of styles, in particular a mix of disco, Latin American, South American, Caribbean, Callaway.
Cool. Were there any hits, or maybe they covered like Cab Calloway songs or something? We'll see if we can find a Kid Creole and the Coconuts.
This is the biggest song. Annie, I'm Not Your Daddy.
Kind of Zoot Suity and kind of B-52s from Miami.
Got a Miami Sound Machine vibe going on.
Album's Tropical Gangsters.
Was James Woods...
Is that Lou Bega?
The club owner? Close enough. Was he the guy... He must have been in that movie. I think he was his friend or the club owner. Let's see. Skip ahead a little. Let's see if we can get to the hook. There's a song you guys know of theirs.
Their other two bigger songs are it's I'm a Wonderful Thing, Baby, and Stool Pigeon.
James Woods was Jake Wise, the nightclub owner.
Yeah, so he owned that club in that. Anyway, cool venue. Remind me, I'll tell you the... She got was used, and I'm telling it to your face. I think this is one of their hits. So you don't have to hit in another place. Probably got some spins on K-Rock. Anyway, I remember I knew who they were.
Sounds like Talking Heads.
Yeah, they got a little of that. So it'll be good to do Laughs for Bald Brian. There's a beautiful big Art Deco plays, and Molly's Pretty in Pink was up the street. They showed it at the after party. Was there, and then I got drunk, and it's a crazy story. Anyway, I was remind me, I'll retell that drunk as I've ever been story, but I was pulling up, and they have those parking lots. There's like one there, another across the street. There's all those like $20 a night, kind of thing. I was driving a 350Z car, which is a Nissan, and it's like your ass is literally 6 inches off the ground. Like you sit super low and lean back in that car. And I was like wearing a suit and stuff, and we're going in to see some event.
Was that your car?
Event.
Oh, wait, was this the Pretty in Pink premiere?
No.
Oh, so
that was another Z car.
How did you go for a Z car at that point?
I had a Z car then.
Oh.
I'll tell you, but remind me. I'll tell the story tomorrow. Anyway, we'll tie it in a Laughs for Bald Brian plug. And I was pulling up, and I had a jacket on and a suit, and then the guy did the move where, like, I'm going to park here, and then he went the $20, and I went, yeah, okay, I'm sitting on my wallet, let me get out of my car, and he's like, $20 now. And I'm like, he's pointing at the parking space, like, how am I going to get out of the car and run for Mexico? Like, you have my car, dude, $20, because they own you, because they're parking guys.
What's the scam going to
And I'm like, just let me pull out. Get out of the car. I'll dig my wallet out. I'll give you the $20. He's like, $20 now. And I was like, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going across the street. And I just put the car in like reverse. And the guy like stopped and he went, okay, fine, park the car. And I went, fuck you. And I just drove across the street and just parked there and walked to the fucking Avalon.
That's your first little foray into fuck me money.
Yeah, my favorite part is when he was like, okay, fine, get out of the car. It's like, fuck you. We're done with this fucking exchange, ass douche. And by the way, guy gets fucking $12 an hour, thinks he owns me because he has a blue vest on. You can't give dumb people power. See what happened with Trump? Tweet that shit.
On the next blah, blah, blah.
They're horrible. They're horrible. Like, this guy's the fucking lowest guy on the totem pole, but he's in charge of everybody who comes through there, and he's going to fuck with their shit. Anyway, sorry, where were we?
So remember the Florida man who mailed all those pipe bombs to various Democrats, Obama to De Niro? Remember this was a story not too long ago, actually the end of last year. That was Cesar Sayoc. Well,
Wait, lived in his van?
Yep, lived in a van down by the river.
Boy,
had
sad when living in a van has now become quaint. Like, oh, look at him, hero. He lives in a van.
Low carbon footprint.
He's not shitting in the park where my kids play. He's actually in a van.
Yeah.
Upstanding citizen.
Yeah.
Well, he says that he abused steroids for over 40 years, and that's what made him make all these bad decisions.
The Twinkie defense.
Yeah, he asserted this in this lengthy and rambling letter to a federal judge that this was the reason, the motivation behind all this. So 57-year-old Sayoc pleaded guilty to explosives-related charges in March and faces a mandatory 10-year prison term and up to life.
I like when you cite something illegal as the reason you did something illegal. No, the reason I did this was because I had illegal steroids for years.
His lawyers told the judge in a different letter that a psychiatrist with specialized knowledge of the effects steroids have on mental health will compose a report on Sayoc's extensive steroid use.
Well, Geragos is going to come in here.
Oh, I can't wait to run this by him.
The way you have no idea when you're like a kid and you're like, a specialist took the stand and explained why this was impossible. And it's like a specialist that these guys paid to give an opinion that was favorable. Like, that's how expert witnesses work. You just get them on there, you pay them, they basically tell you what you need to know.
What'll prove your point.
And the steroid thing is a whole shitload of gray area. Like, no, we're going to just go, who knows? My thing is, Twinkies may affect you, steroids may affect you, everything may affect you. So with that in mind, we'll just focus on the crime.
Is it like saying I ran over that kid in the crosswalk because I was driving drunk? I'd been drinking, so that's why that affected me.
You're free to go.
It's like, there's an excuse.
Yeah.
It's a reason. There's always been a reason and an excuse.
But it's also, to me, like, I was in the subway and I hit that stranger over the head with a hammer because I'm insane. Like, okay, more reason why you never get to come out again.
You're not helping your point. The best example of that ever was on The Sopranos with Steve Buscemi, Tony Uncle Al, when he had to prove that, did anybody? Adriana was not blowing Tony Soprano when they got in the car accident because she had seatbelt abrasions, and she wouldn't have had her seatbelt on if she was blowing Tony Soprano. Thank you.
MarkGeragos is in studio. He's energized.
Not only energized, I'm looking at the most beautiful woman with the most beautiful necklace.
Oh, thank you. I have a Dolly Parton shirt on. That's what he's talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure that's what he was admiring.
Yeah, that was what I was admiring. Adam, I haven't seen you in way too long.
I know. Mark's been traveling. Mark's been in court. Mark's been in the news.
Mark has been wading through juror questionnaires for probably a month. And then finally, last Friday, before jury selection, we entered a plea, and I now have a hole in my schedule, so I'm back.
Is that okay? So you were entering a plea in the whole sex cult scandal
NXIVM.
NXIVM. Yes.
So it kind of unfolded as there's Keith Raniere, who's on trial. Allison Mack pleaded, who's of Smallville.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and she said, "I'm sorry, and I'm not associated with them anymore."
Yeah, and she pled, and then we were the last two defendants on Good Friday afternoon. So there's something about being in the Brooklyn federal court on Good Friday afternoon, entering a plea with your client. But I adore Claire.
So Claire is the heiress who got caught up in this, and you guys pled.
Correct. Where they gave, she pled to, they dismissed the racketeering counts, they dismissed the RICO count, and they gave her a harboring an alien and identity theft, something like that, with guidelines. But in federal court, I won't belabor it, guidelines are no longer binding, so the judge can do whatever the judge wants to do. So
for her, freedom and a job well done for you?
She's I would say grateful, and I adore her. So, there's a quality of Claire, I tease her about this, that reminds me of Paulette. in a lot of ways. So they're very similar personalities.
She's the heir to the what fortune?
Seagram's. Edgar Bronfman was her father, who passed away a couple of years ago. Her older brother by a different mother was Time Warner.
Seagram's probably the biggest sort of alcohol.
Yeah, because it started in Canada.
In Canada, that's right.
Yeah, because
they're massive.
Club, remember?
They're massive.
Everything. They were Seagram's Coors at one point. That they bought up a lot of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, they're the reason why all the Jewish kids go on the birthright trip. Seagram sponsored that.
Oh, really?
At least when I went, in 2000.
So they bought Manischewitz.
That's right.
So I'm jumping around, but Lori Loughlin, speaking of pleading, so please explain to us how they gave him a deal, they said no, and when they said no, then they tacked on a bunch of extra stuff.
This is what generally happens. When they file, they can either indict you first, which means they go to the grand jury, or they can file a criminal complaint first. Then they tell you, when they file the criminal complaint first, then they negotiate with you. You either negotiate, accept a plea deal, come to an arrangement. Generally, there's a give and take, but it happens pretty quick. I mean, the federal system a lot of times takes longer. We used to teasingly say is a glacial pace going forward, but once you're in there, is much quicker than the state court. The state court, you go through the preliminary hearing, you do all that stuff, especially in California where you have that. We don't use the grand jury that much. But then if you don't take it, then they go in and they indict. And then, usually when they indict, as a federal judge friend of mine used to say, they give you tax, tip, and service charge.
So they usually they offer you a deal. They think, okay, here's a pretty generous deal that you should take. When you don't take it, they get a little offended and they ratchet it up.
I think that's a fair statement. I think that I don't know that I would say offended, but they say, look, if we're going to cut you slack for early acceptance. That's the way they phrase it. Mm-hmm. So under the sentencing guidelines, you can get 2 levels or 3 levels downward on the guidelines for early acceptance. And if you don't accept early, then you don't get that. And that's a pretty good range. That can be real time.
Is it a rule of thumb that you should probably go with in a situation like that, in a situation like hers? Is it a rule of thumb that probably just go ahead and agree to the first offering they make you?
Not necessarily. I think everything is fact-driven because and always knowledge-driven. I mean, if you're hiring somebody like Singer to get your kids into college, look, I don't know of a parent around who wouldn't want to do everything possible to get their kid in.
Adam Carolla's one.
Except for me.
Yeah,
the guy sitting across from me was a good example of what you're talking about.
But wait, if your daughter is on the bubble, you're not going to do something?
Oh, yeah, I'll knock her down.
I'd rather have her on
the bubble.
Rather have her on the pole than the bubble. Burning, man. The bubble costs me. The pole brings the cash in.
But don't you...
Yeah, buddy. A little Italian on the bubble Corolla. Oh, wait a minute. She's on the pole now. Jade, stage 4. Jade, safety school, UNLV. Okay. Or Arizona State. Sorry, Gary. Anyway.
But wait, isn't the Corolla mantra that you were raised, you always characterize it like by a pack of wolves or whatever. You were just kind of out there.
Pack would have been nice.
Yeah. Exactly. By one wolf, kind of a limping wolf. But you always you extol the virtues of family, and you always you always kind of longingly talk about family. So why wouldn't you want a parent who is driven by wanting their kid to do the best?
Oh, I'm for them.
That's Lynette.
And I don't.
He's got it. It's Lynette.
It's Lynette.
I don't begrudge any of these sort of first world problems where one rich person is giving money to another rich person to get their rich kid Instagram star daughter into a group of rich people for a crew team or whatever. These are all neither here nor there to me. I don't care. And I don't even need them sufficiently punished because this is just kind of rich on rich crime.
Rich crime.
It doesn't affect me. It just, pay your money.
The first thing I thought about when this happened, besides getting inundated with phone calls from prospective clients, was I thought about Susan Pinsky and Paulette parading the triplets and Jake through I swear to God, this actually happened, someplace in South Pass or San Marino where the kids, there's booths and they're in preschool. and they're literally auditioning for each of the preschool booths, like a fair. Yeah. And I said, this is insanity. I remember telling Drew, this is like clinically insane. I can understand it for college, but we're talking preschool. No, that's what you need to do.
Well, also, if you really just distill down on it, there's two subjects, and then I'll expand that into this third, which is obviously they find out, I've famously said a million times, when they send the astronauts up to the space station, they lose muscle density and bone mass and all that stuff because there's no gravity. It's zero gravity. They've now figured out that all these kids are allergic to peanuts and hay fever and all this kind of stuff because of the zero gravity their immune system deals with, because they all have air conditioning with HEPA filters and triple glazed windows and blah, blah, blah. Study from 200 years ago in England, rich kids had hay fever, poor kids didn't have hay fever. So now we're going to extend that into the sort of physical scholastic world, where now they don't have any adversity in terms of at home, they don't have it, there no internal adversity and no mental adversity. We're going to have a bunch of fucking hemophiliac pussies who aren't going to be able to do jack shit with their life, and I don't want my kids to be those kids. I'd much rather have them go into the military for a few years and then knock around JUCO or something and figure out how to pull themselves up and extricate themselves. You can do all you want. I mean, you get those kids into the best schools and prep schools and everything. At some point, they need a little adversity. They need the bully down the hall. They need the teacher that doesn't like them. They need to walk to school. They need to realize that we can't afford to buy you your own instrument. You have to use the one with the dent in it that the school gives you. They need that. This notion that we're going to avoid all that with our kids and somehow they're going to turn out better is just like saying, go up to the space station and eat moon pies.
Well, so this would
around.
be a first cousin of the participation trophy.
Yes.
Okay.
Although I always feel like I need to tell people participation trophies were around when we played Pop Warner football. You give everyone who showed up one, and then you pick out the special kids, and you give them MVP, and you give them best defensive player, and that means something.
Do you remember in high school who the MVP was on your football team?
Yes. Mike Durant. I got best defensive player.
You got best defensive?
I got best defensive player, and he got MVP, I think, and best offensive player. That's what I recall.
I remember the kid Mariano, but I don't remember his last name, but he was a three-sport athlete, and he was amazing. And you didn't have to give him a participation trophy. You wanted him on your team.
So back to Lori. Sorry.
Yeah.
What are they got? No. So I turn on the news and I go, well, they're definitely doing time. They're doing time. And I'm like, really? Are they really doing time?
Well, it looks to me like the original offer, and Felicity Huffman had the same, I think, was what's called a split sentence.
And Felicity took it?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so a split sentence is if the guideline range is such that it kind of points the judge in a general direction as to where he can head. And then he makes certain findings and says, okay, I'm going to either give you house arrest, or I'm going to give you a halfway house, or I'm going to give you electronic monitoring combined with maybe some bit of time. You know, a lot of judges will do a year and a day. That's a common sentence of some kind that gets imposed. But it looks to me like a home detention type sentence.
So no one's ever going inside of a cell.
Well, look, if you're at a minimum security in the federal level, generally, if it's nonviolent, if you have no prior criminal history, you will generally get placed in a minimum security, which is generally more like a camp. If you've got a medical issue, you will go to some place like Carswell Medical Facility.
But is Felicity? And then
when
why?
You say cell, it's not going to be like the state.
But she will go
it's
somewhere.
It's not going to be like the old Sybil Brand.
Right.
It's not Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
It's not chained heat.
Caged heat.
Caged heat. What does? All right. So, but she will have to go somewhere and change her clothes.
But I would imagine
the Oscars.
Gifting suite.
Martha Stewart is a good example. When Martha was,
Yeah, it doesn't make in a world where we go, these guys, the poor black guys that sold the dime bag, now they're in. Yes, I'm extending the same. Don't put them in. They don't pose a threat. Let them pay taxes.
It's interesting too. I haven't done a deep dive on it yet, but I've got a client who I think is probably eligible, so I've got it on my list of things to do. Is the First Step Act, which is the new criminal justice reform.
The new Kim Kardashian Act?
Exactly. It's called the First Step Act. And so I've got a client who's over 60 and has done 60% of her sentence. So it looks like she may be eligible for that. So I'm diving into that. But Kimmy K, give her credit. She did what nobody had the balls to do before. I mean, the Willie Brown used to famously say, when California was going 3 strikes crazy, and people would say, "Wait, you're the progressive guy, why? And you're African American. Why the hell are you letting this happen?" He says, "It's the third rail of California politics. You don't get in the way of the mass incarceration."
So the way I hear it is that Massimo and Lori Loughlin are in trouble because they didn't take the deal.
Correct.
And they may go in. I'm also curious why we were speculating aloud why William H. Macy doesn't seem to be involved, but Massimo does. So you have a husband-wife team, and then you just have a wife team.
Well, I think you've got it. You just can't tag somebody by guilt by association. So my guess was when Macy was there, because famously there was those pictures of him helping to arrange for her bail. And my instinct was that he probably has no meetings or is not on the tape or is not on a wire or no email or no knowledge of what was actually happening. Remember, there's nothing that I can see that would be illegal about it until you hire somebody to take a test. Then that's going to be a problem. There was that famous case we had in California in the state court years ago where some guy was taking the test in Hawaii and doing the answers to somebody else on the LSATs and then running out of the thing. Then there's this guy who I guess just pled within the last 2 weeks who was actually the test taker, who would go around and take the tests.
I made my bones in the early 80s being paid not to take tests for kids. Affluent families would come up to me and go, "Carolla, I don't want you anywhere near that bungalow." And I'd go, "All right. Well, I might go by there, check it out." Well, they start pulling out 20s. What's it going to take to keep you on your futon?
There was a guy who was paid once to vomit in the test so that everybody would get extra time. And so that was a young
Ray Oldhofer.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of this, the Laura Janke, the ex-assistant women's soccer coach at the school, is testifying against Lori and that whole crew.
All right. Well,
that would be what's called 5K cooperation. So when she enters her plea, she would testify against, get cooperation, and that would presumably reduce her sentence.
Do we owe a break, Max? All right. We'll take a quick break. So I'm going to tease. When we come back, I'm going to say we'll forget about prison versus facility versus club fed. I just want to say when we come back, I want to tease what you think these people will do. At home, house arrest, ankle bracelet, probation, or if they're physically, and who physically is going to have to leave their house and stay somewhere else. We'll do that right after this. MarkGeragos has joined us to mop up the news. So predictions on Loughlin and Massimo and Macy and company are...
Macy, I don't get the impression they're going to do anything.
Can I ask a question first? Sorry, do you represent anyone or know anyone involved in the case?
I do not currently represent anyone. I do know lots of people involved.
Okay. All right.
And who's going...
Didn't mean to interrupt.
Who's going to have to leave their house and sleep somewhere else?
If you... the only people who have real exposure and who are rolling the dice would be Lori and Massimo, because they're going to presumably go to trial or try to do put the government through its motions and steps.
Well, and what came out today or yesterday is them saying, we just gave them the money. We didn't know what Singer was going to do with it. And that's what they're kind of relying on.
Right. Then now they've got Singer cooperating, which is what my father used to say. They give the deal to the bank robber to get the getaway driver. But
yeah, so once he's cooperating, there's real trouble. And also...
He knows where all the bodies are buried.
Yeah.
He buried them.
He was paid to bury him.
You don't deal with a guy named Canary Singer and not expect to turn state's evidence against you. So,
well, Canary, you know what your game is.
So...
It's so good.
They're going to be in trouble, and how much of it is the way the wind is blowing? We'll go back to your new best friend, Jussie Smollett, and say that people are going, we're tired of these rich people getting away with this stuff, and now we're going to make an example. Like, how much?
There's a lot of that.
That affects the trial.
But that's always the underbelly of the criminal justice system. No matter what you say, the criminal justice system has its flaws because it's the government. I mean, people who automatically trust the criminal justice system who are also distrustful of government. I've never understood. It's the same thing. I mean, it's just one branch. It's like the DMV of criminal justice.
So Lori and Massimo may end up going somewhere and staying somewhere.
Or they could get acquitted. I mean, for all I know, Massimo's got a defense on this thing. So it would not – I can't imagine he's micromanaging. It would be surprising to me if he's micromanaging something that would be shady from his standpoint. But you never know.
All we need is the whiff of he wasn't involved or he didn't know what was going on or he was just cutting checks and handing them to somebody to not see the inside of a facility, right? And I'm guessing he has someone who's pretty competent who's representing him.
Anybody who's been married can understand the idea of an innocent spouse.
Yes.
Both ways.
Yes, both ways.
I mean, there's stuff that Lynette does during the day you have no idea. She's got no idea what you're doing.
That's
Paulette
true.
doesn't have a clue as to what I'm doing at any single point, and I have no idea what she's doing other than buying ribbon and walking around La Cañada. So
with purpose.
Yeah, with purpose is right. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, people don't... People assume because you're married that you must know what the spouse is doing. I just think that's the biggest misnomer.
Lots of people want to know.
You wonder about a crime. When I would come home and I'd see the Platinum family for the L.A. La Cañada School Center, the bit of cardboard sign in front of my house. I'd go, who put that sign up? Well, that's what you get.
When you pay $5,000 to LCUSD.
That's a lot for these two. Oh, no, a piece. A piece. You pay $5,000 a piece. I'm like, who are we getting to the gold family?
What does it get us?
Silver.
Wasn't there some aspect of the case, too, and maybe it didn't apply to them, the people we're talking about, but where, like, they would write off their payment as a donation, and that was somehow illegal. You know what I mean?
If that was the case. But if the check went straight to USC's foundation, there's no problem with that. If it's a legitimate 501c3.
They're paying Singer, though, aren't they?
If they're paying Singer directly and then writing it off, that's potentially a problem. Okay.
They have to do it the Jimmy Iovine way.
Yeah,
and just put on a wing.
Library.
Yeah.
Where are you with like something like Robert Kraft? I'm semi-outraged by that.
I do not understand that prosecution at all. But you and I have talked on Reasonable Doubt about this. I had a buddy of mine just tried a case here in the criminal courts building where the cop admitted on the stand. The cop admitted on the stand that he got the happy ending. He got the hand job to prove that my buddy's client, who's a Asian woman who's a little older, is the pimp. Giving the
good
hand
field
job.
work.
Yeah.
Really goes the extra mile.
What about the part where they go, well, we're going to release the footage now,
right?
Full release, full release why do we need to see that? Why do they need to release it?
Because they want the first paragraph of his obituary to be Robert Kraft, the disgraced NFL owner who,
And is there any way to defend? I mean,
I think there is. I don't think that's they offered him what's called a deferred prosecution. So, which is what I expected they would, which is just keep your pants up for 6 months, don't do anything, and admit that we could have proven our case, and you can get it dismissed. He doesn't want to do that.
What about the part where they go human trafficking and there is no human trafficking, and now that's forever kind of seared into our loose memories of, Kraft was with that human trafficking case over there in Florida, wasn't he? And how negligent is that? And then does Kraft have a recourse? Can Kraft go, hey, you put this stuff out, you put human trafficking under my name, and now...
I think it's actually more insidious than that. If I understand correctly, and I know his legal team very well, I think that the search warrant to place the camera was based on the human trafficking. So there's an argument that you have to suppress it because if it was a bad faith representation made to a magistrate in order to get the peak.
So basically, the cops lying to a judge to put the cameras in.
That would be the
layman's
version of it. We have to call it Leon in bad faith.
Well, are we allowed?
Don't you love that? Because God forbid you use a lying cop moniker.
But so can you throw the whole thing out? Like if you go, hey, we put this camera up under this auspices of this crime that wasn't happening, and then caught somebody else in
I think that's
snare.
Exactly what's pending is a motion to suppress, because the fruit of the poisonous tree, the doctrine is if the tape was put there illegally or in bad faith by virtue of what the representations made to the judge, then you don't get to use anything. You don't get rewarded for that.
I think you guys are missing a very obvious thing. It's in front of all of us.
Which is?
Dolphins fans.
The worst. Now taking it. Now I'm going to say this. I should have said it 20 minutes ago. Mark's not allowed to talk about the Jussie Smollett thing and his involvement in it. I'm guessing, which I was told in advance. The Jussie Smollett thing, in terms of the city of Chicago wanting to come after him for the money.
No, I could talk about that.
That's still on the table?
Long. Yeah. So we filed something. We're going to file something on that. We filed something day before yesterday on the press wanting to open up the file. And I said, well, that's great, except why do they get the file when it wasn't turned over to us in the first place? And it was the prosecution who's the one who made the motion. It wasn't us who made the motion. So I've got a lot of opinions about that. Hopefully by next week I will have resolved the issues so that I can come back on and discuss it all.
Mueller, that case.
Have you read? Wait, I haven't heard your opinion, but I read the
read
report.
it cover to cover twice.
Yeah, I haven't.
Pages.
Look, you watch Fox, you get one version. You watch CNN, you get another version.
Which is why I turned off the TV and stopped watching either, and I just decided I'd read the report itself.
I'm kind of in general feel like. In a weird way, I felt this way about Bill Cosby. Like when somebody comes into trial and they have all the information and they have all the witnesses and all the paperwork and all the money and all the time in the world, and at the end they go, we don't have what we need. We got close, like with Cosby, you got a hung jury or whatever it is. Right. You got close. I don't like the system. I'm not saying I like Trump or I like Bill Cosby. I don't like a system when someone goes, well, then we'll just do it again until we get it done. Like, I don't like that. I didn't like it with Cosby. Like
the interesting thing, you want me to get in the weeds on this? I was going to do a reasonable doubt, but I'll do it here. The interesting thing is whoever wrote that, and I think it was Andrew Weissman who wrote it, or maybe it was a collaboration. It was very, for a legal nerd or geek, it was very well written. I mean, I appreciate well written legal arguments, and I thought they hewed to exactly what the mandate was of the special counsel. They talked about the fact that under separation of powers, if you indict the president, that the Department of Justice has already opined that you can't do that because that would then have a separation of powers consequences, and that's the heart of our Constitution. There are at least two footnotes where he basically said that's up for Congress to decide, or it's for the authorities once he leaves office, which, by the way, are all the same arguments I was making 20 years ago when defending Susan McDougal and during Whitewater and everything else. So it's interesting, and Adam's heard me talk about this ad nauseum. It's interesting how everything that the Democrats were arguing 20 years ago during Whitewater has now been taken and written in the Mueller report. Yeah. It is all cyclical. And the same people who were arguing back then, that's why you find these tapes of Lindsey Graham acting crazy and the others. for them now to take the position they're taking, where were they 20 years ago? And you can see it. Just Google it. You'll find the tapes. I just want somebody to be consistent, and that's why I think you got to give Mueller some credit. I mean, Mueller was around at the time and in law enforcement, was not a crazy then and was not a crazy now. And Hughes, I think, to the more conservative, established, you can always be a flamethrower. Anybody can be a flamethrower and say, indict him, indict him, indict him. But there are constitutional issues. I've been there, the constitutional issues. And surprisingly, you know who comes out best in all this is the guy who's been pilloried by the left is Dershowitz. Because Dershowitz was making these arguments and people were mocking him unmercifully for the last 8 months. And now you read the Mueller's report, and it looks like Dershowitz wrote it, even though he did write a foreword, I think.
So what moving forward, where is your head at? I mean, where should we be as a nation? Like, if you were in charge of the world instead of just a third of the world, if you're in charge of everything, what would you do with this report?
Well, look, I think
how should we proceed?
There's political consequences, and history, as Brian just said, it's cyclical. They don't have the votes in the Senate, so they could impeach him in the House, but then he's going to go to the Senate and he's going to get acquitted. I mean, that's a slam dunk. So if he gets acquitted in the Senate, all that's going to do is, just like it did with Clinton, increase his popularity to 73%. So if you're on the left and you've got any brain cells that are firing, you're going to say to yourself, this is a fool's errand. Just from a political standpoint. From a justice standpoint, there wasn't anything that jumped off the page. He makes the same argument. Trump makes the same argument. Mueller makes the same argument that I made with McDougal. With McDougal, it was obstruction of justice. As far as I know, the only independent counsel obstruction of justice jury trial was Susan. We made the same argument. It was not a legitimate investigation. There is in the jury instruction, you can make that argument that I didn't have corrupt intent because the investigation was not legit. That's exactly what the Trump and Rudy have been arguing. And I want to be consistent. I argued that with Susan. I thought it was appropriate then. She was acquitted of the obstruction of justice. And I think the same thing would happen here.
What about subpoenaing or looking into tax records and the subject of that last subject from
as somebody who has been audited by every single department down to the Board of Equalization, City of LA, the IRS. I don't think you should be using the IRS or the audit process as a political weapon. I think that's very dangerous. And remember what happened. You famously complained that nobody ever followed up on that last time they tried that. Remember, during the Obama administration?
Oh, yeah, they did. He did sort of weaponize the IRS to go after whatever nonprofits. I just don't think.
Look, famously, what's his name, Alex Kaczynski, who was the presiding justice of the Ninth Circuit, once said, there isn't any adult walking around who some enterprising prosecutor couldn't find 3 violations. That's why you need prosecutors who are deliberative. You need them to say, do I need to make this case? What's the efficacy of making this case? What is the reason? What's the compelling need to make a case? Because you can torture. I subscribe, I don't know if you do on Twitter, to a federal crime a day. And
no, but hold on. Sounds awesome.
It is such an awesome thing. They come up with the best crimes of the day, which is they just go through the federal statutes and find things that you would never look. I've been doing criminal defense and law for 40 years. Not a day goes by that I see a statute I never knew existed.
Did Eric Holder get into trouble for that whole IRS thing?
I think he was found in contempt of Congress, but I thought it was on the Fast and Furious.
Oh, that may be wrong. This is why it's important to be likable, because you think back on Obama and you're like, nothing. There's nothing. He just sailed right through. But there were the IRS thing, and there was the Fast and Furious and Eric Holder and everything else. But the media loved him so much, you just kind of skated
Teflon
past it. And then in your mind, it doesn't even register. No. It's like, I didn't see any. Rachel Maddow never said anything about Obama. You just skate forward. Everyone, be likable, would you please? But don't try too hard. It makes you unlikable. All right, let's bring it home.
You got it. I'm Gina Grad, and that's the news.
Gina Grad. That was the news with Gina Grad.